Do you have any kind of feelings around your sexuality, what it means to be gay right now? The kind of struggles you face moving through this kind of quote unquote community, but the way it is?
This is going to be controversial. If you had to choose between outlawing gay marriage or outlawing minors being mutilated, which one do you pick? Gay people should be more critical of ISIS. It was actually considered taboo. Dating has been difficult. I've never been asked about that on record before, but I can speak about it. A lot of gay conservatives.
If there's anything you don't want to talk about, then I'll edit it out. But
I want to talk about it.
Okay, cool. Obviously, a gay man like myself, and you know, it's been great on a friendship level getting to know you this past year. You did a video with Peter Boghossian and Helen Joyce where you talked a bit about your sexuality, and I remember this was before I met you actually, and I was very moved by it. And yeah, I mean, it made me feel quite emotional.
If I could take a pill to change my sexual orientation, I would move.
God, I can't go far enough away. Would you be straight?
Yeah, would you be straight, and would you be?
Wow,
would you guys?
It's very personal.
Yeah, isn't it?
It is personal. Yeah.
I'm staying here. Absolutely staying here. I mean,
this was a really difficult question to answer on the record.
Okay.
I moved here, you know, just my commitment to be honest in this project. In recent years, gay and trans and non-binary has been made very vogue and promoted. If you notice, let's just say particularly the gay men that are highlighted and seen as really cool and figures we should look up to in pop culture, they're young gay men, and growing old and being gay and without children and being unable to produce a child outside of other interventions is a sad reality, and it's a difficult one, and most gay people don't really come to terms with it. Well, when you're young, you know, you just think about how you're free from a lot of obligations, right? You can have a lot of carefree sex and no obligations, not have to deal with many of the emotional difficulties that may come from a female partner. I'm speaking as a gay male experience.
No offense.
no, it's true.
But thinking about the older experience, you know, when my father fell ill and I spent a lot of times in hospitals and in settings where people were dying, I noticed those patients who did have no family around and no children around. And that is a very heartbreaking reality that a lot of gay men in older age experience, unfortunately.
Trying to think of a nice open question to start off with, but I mean, do you have any kind of feelings around your sexuality, what it means to be gay right now, and the kind of struggles you face moving through this kind of quote unquote community, but the way it is?
I think being a openly gay conservative journalist it's a pretty small space, and the American right, a very important part of the American right-wing identity movements, is also social conservatism, and particularly Christian conservatism. So there are certain ethics that a lot of the mainstream right in the United States have around, you know, their views on marriage, for example, and their views on homosexuality. Before the second term of Trump started, I think some of these differences were sort of just put aside because we could all unite on the extremism of the woke and the far left, and how they have just crossed the line every way possible. They needed just sort of a unified pushback. You know, now that the American right has political power, and you could argue or ascend it in certain ways. You know, like there's been a lot of, like, big tech treats the right very differently now. A lot of them are trying to cozy up, have been for a long time trying to cozy up with Trump and others. And then so you see online quite nasty divisions that are coming out on the right, and one of it is this sort of unresolved issue of what do you do with about the gays on the right wing in our movement. And there are some who, have views that they don't want us part of it, and others who are more inclusive. And I'm up for a good debate. And I used to be part of the new atheist movement. I was quite intellectually drawn to that from my undergrad years, and it was quite difficult for me to accept and see that new atheism in America. This was going back to around 2010, 11, 12. It really kind of built the groundwork for like woke to become what it is, because new atheism was essentially, even though it's about atheism, it was primarily, at least in the American context, given that it's America, it was about attacking the Christian conservatives, in attacking them intellectually, driving them from institutions and driving them from political power, and humiliating them. And, it was all done in the name of we're just promoting logic and rationality and science and all that. And then, what kind of stepped into a lot of cultural dominance and political dominance with this hole that was left after the Christian right became quite ineffective politically, was what we observe now as woke or progressives or the radical left. And they've been hugely destructive, not just institutions, but culturally, and to the point, where to me, it's like, how do you have people who could be okay with this level of political violence in America that happened 4 and 5 years ago? And yet they were, they have been fully indoctrinated in a very sort of passive way. A lot of the normies have been indoctrinated in a way without even, they don't realize it at all. You mentioned some of the examples of people, in your life who you come across. So I'm not willing, for example, I don't think it's good for the right, for the gays who are conservative to chastise strongly those who have conservative religious beliefs. I heard somebody bring up this point before. This is going to be controversial. It's like, if you had to choose between outlawing gay marriage or outlawing minors being mutilated, which one do you pick? Yeah, I'll leave. I won't say what my answer is for that, but I mean, it's something to think about, really. It's, you have.
I mean, I can say, I mean, I think the elephant in the room, everyone can see it, but I would sooner give up my right to be able to marry to protect children. And I think, well, I mean, a lot of the woke gays don't view it as mutilation, which is the issue. But I think particularly with some older gay men, more than you think, we're pretty content with civil partnership. And there even is a view with some men that, they think it's okay for heterosexuals to have their own thing that's theirs, and then gays can have theirs. And I really just don't think that's very controversial. But I don't feel super strongly either way on it. I'm more curious though, just, you're obviously a figure of prominence, controversial in some ways. You've been misrepresented. You've been called names that don't represent you accurately. You've been attacked. Some may view you as a far right figure, incorrectly so, in my opinion. I hear from a lot of gay men. My DMs is like 95% gay men who watch my channel. And I guess, to any of those guys watching now, it's like the main thing that keeps me going, because obviously you face a lot of adversity being public, and a lot of that comes from what were once your straight allies or whatever. And it does mean the world to me to have that support, and for people to say like, what you're doing is actually really good. But at the same time, I know that most of them also say I'm basically in secret. I'm in hiding about my views. And I'm seeing this sort of weird presentation of almost like the second coming out. I feel like I need to kind of coin that phrase if someone hasn't already, because you had a period of having to come out as gay, but now there's another period of having to come out as a non-woke gay, not even right-wing, just like a gay person that believes in sex, that sex is real. I think, I'd love to just know, what is it like for you? I know that you live in the UK, navigating that dating world, and if you're willing to share, and the gay scene, if you ever partake in that, being the sort of figure you are.
Dating has been difficult. I've never been asked about that on record before, but I can speak about it. A lot of gay conservatives.
If there's anything you don't want to talk about, then I'll edit it out. But
I want to talk about it.
Okay, cool. Go.
I think a lot of every young gay conservative man knows that feeling of being ostracized when trying to seek a partner or a mate, because liberal organizations take gay people for granted, because for the most part, almost all of us are just go along that without thinking. And so if you have somebody that is not only doesn't go along with it, but actively rejects it and tries to challenge it in many ways and publicly, like I do, it's extremely jarring. It's offensive to them, even the ones who aren't necessarily woke. It's just, my body of work, my reporting is offensive to a lot of people. They find it very offensive when I focus that, particularly on these group of criminal suspects I'm reporting on are all trans, for example. That's offensive to a lot of people. Or that I say that these so-called racial justice groups actually are not interested in racial justice at all, but instead are grifters who are interested in making a lot of money off white guilt. That's offensive. And so, it hasn't made me popular here or in the US, you can imagine. And that's reflected in the dating experience. It can be hard. Yeah, I don't really know what can be done. A lot of the ways that gay dissidents, if you want to call us that, connect are through social media, through online, but we're spread out. Even if we're in the same country, it's a huge country like the US. So, you're hours away on a plane flight from some of the nearest people who you might connect with well. So it can be lonely. And I'm not surprised that a lot of the people who message you stay silent for that reason. If this isn't like your work or your area of writing, then why risk it, right? You might be living a pretty comfortable life. For me, I remember, I knew that I was risking a lot being in Portland, Oregon, 8 years ago, when I started pushing back on certain received wisdoms. At that time, I was quite vocally critical about radical Islam, for example, in immigration. I feel like the conversation hasn't moved forward in 8 years on that, unsurprisingly, because a lot of people don't want the conversation to move on that. But at the time, I was doing reporting and writing on that. And even though it might, to me, have seemed so obvious why gay people should be more critical of ISIS, it was actually considered taboo by the legacy so-called gay rights organizations in America. Even with all these ISIS jihadist attacks that were happening domestically and internationally, it's just like they don't want to touch it because it was seen as Islamophobic somehow to criticize IS. That's how stupid some of these organizations are that purport to represent gay interests. So yeah, maybe that's why a lot of my work is solo. I'm a solo journalist. I'm independent and I do writings for publications, but usually it's just me. I'm not working with multiple co-writers, for example. I generally pursue stories that always irritate somebody.
Mm-mm. Well, I have so much respect for you for, being truthful, and I just don't, I think when you do that, it's very hard to look back and regret. It's easier to look back and regret on, I should have said something, but I was a coward. And that's definitely not what you are, if you know what I mean. And I do remain optimistic because I think there are a lot of silent people out there. And then in this country, we're already kind of seeing this revolt. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few years, but hopefully there will be a space in future in which more centrist or right-leaning minded gay people are just normalized. But I'm not sure. One argument actually I see a lot on the right in pushback to woke is they sort of disregard the notion of a gay community, and they say something along the lines of, oh, well, just because of who you like to sleep with, why would you automatically be friends? And why does there need to be a gay event? Like, it's just who you like to sleep with. And I understand the angle they're coming from, but me being gay, I just, very much disagree, because the kind of connections I've made with other gay men are on a very different level to other people in my life, and I do think it's important to have a space to be able to forge those. So, like, is that something that interests you, like this idea of a gay community and gay network? And do you kind of see a difference there when you do befriend a gay man, or for you, is it sort of irrelevant, like some people on the right are sort of claiming?
It's not irrelevant, it's sexuality is a big part of how gay people understand themselves and how they have come into a certain identity. Some of that's been imposed on them from wider society, right? When you recognize yourself as not being heterosexual, that difference is highlighted in your mind. And so encountering people who, befriending people who are gay, you can have somewhat of a connection. I mean, it won't be deep. It is shallow. It's one thing, but it is a connection nonetheless. I think it can be comparable actually to being, like, for me, being of East Asian background. If I encounter somebody who's also sharing that ethnic background, it's not like I have more of an affinity to them, but it's more of like, if their parents, for example, were also immigrants or refugees from Southeast Asia or something, it's like, oh, we share that, so we probably have some similar experiences that we can connect on. And I think that's been actually quite similar, for example, when I meet gay conservatives, because it's not just about being gay. It's like, what's it been like being gay and conservative for you, wherever they are in America and the world, or if they're in big liberal cities, they might have come across a lot of hostility and have had to be quite isolated. So for that reason, I think I'm a big advocate of people meeting in person, like connecting in person. Yeah. I think people have become too comfortable, including myself, with living digitally, from COVID, having meetings and events online or virtually. The vibe of meeting in person is completely different than through these online settings. On a tangent, I think the posts and the videos that you've done about the I Kissed a Boy BBC show, about the woman who's participating in a gay men's dating show, I think that's work is important, because a lot of gay men don't experience sort of the really big challenges that presents itself when somebody of the opposite sex is in their space in the way that women do, right? Like, none of us are threat. In sports, it's not an issue. I cannot even think of a particular example where a female competing professionally on a men's team has won. I don't even know if there are any examples, and it's never been a controversy. And even among, in toilets and stuff, it's like, that type of space, a female going into that space, she would be the one that's vulnerable, not the males in there. And so, men just don't really think about the gender and trans issue in the same way, because they're not at the same risk, understandably. But there are certain challenges that can present themselves. And I think with that show, I do think that it's irresponsible of the producers to put the contestants in a position where they have to consent to that. I mean, I saw that the statements that has been put out by the BBC in response to, like, complaints online it's just this copy and paste statement saying that they're a show about diversity. and that their contestants are made aware of it, and they're fine with it. I don't think that the producers would have taken on contestants who would have said no. And you know, I think, I mean, gay men are extremely visual in who they're attracted to, and you know, somebody who
I've been quite pointed about that.
Yeah, and somebody who has transitioned but has the energy and physicality of a female is off-putting to a lot of gay men, and in a romantic setting, and to try to normalize that in so-called inclusivity, I think is, I understand the pushback. I mean, I've been critical online, and I feel bad that this transgender contestant has been sort of put in that position to receive that type of backlash. But it's on the producers, and
that's a good point you mentioned, and it surprised me really. Kind of, it seems like the kind of, I don't know if you call it reporting or commentary I've done on it is the most kind of in depth. I'm surprised there aren't more people talking about it. But just kind of a final point there about that woman being attacked, and we could talk a lot more about this show, but I do have other videos on it if anyone wants to see. You know, I just find it so hard to strike a middle ground with this stuff, because I try and come at things from a compassionate lens as much as possible, and kind of understanding the psychology behind certain things and how this phenomenon has occurred. Like, it's, people strawman it and think this woman just decided to, you know, be really narcissistic, be a gay man, and then just decide, I'm going to go colonize these men. And I know that that's the effect that it has, but I'm always trying to come at it from a perspective of trying to understand how, like, what got into this person's mind, what have been the sociological and psychological and biological influences that led to this happening. And then naturally, then from the kind of right-wing or gender critical side, loads of people start criticizing me, saying nasty things. Like, you can just, it's really frustrating, because then I question myself and I think, wait, am I being too compassionate? But then on the flip side of it, although I'm very outspoken and I say what's on my mind, like, sometimes I feel guilty. I feel putting out these videos about this woman, I imagine her sitting in her room, seeing the thumbnail or seeing that this is being shared and being upset. And that upsets me. Like, I don't want her to feel that way. And I feel guilty that I could be the bearer of that. But then ultimately, I think it's important for me to speak out on it, if otherwise it will never be addressed. So, I mean, do you ever feel that kind of internal battle between feeling guilty about things, but also knowing that it's important to tell the truth?
Going back to 2017, when I was a very nascent journalist and I was working at a student newspaper, Portland State University, I posted a video of a Muslim student on my university campus at a public event sharing his views on the punishment for apostasy in Islam. And he was quite unequivocal in his understanding of what an Islamic State is and should be, that it is death. And that's just how it is. And that video, you could say, went viral. I think at that point I only had 1,000 followers, but it was shared by other places, and there was some news reporting on it on conservative news sites. And a few days after that, I was called into a meeting by an administrator, the editor-in-chief. And they brought up the video, and there were many complaints. And the administrator agreed with this view that I shouldn't have put up the video because I brought negative attention onto a student. And they fired me from the student paper. I was an editor at that time, one of the longest serving editors, and they fired me very publicly, in that they announced it in a news story that went into print with my picture. So it was very meant to sort of like, we're really going to make sure that you're not going to have any career going forward in journalism, because, you know, on a CV, I put Portland State Vanguard, and prospective newsroom looks me up, would see that I was fired in a very public way, Islamophobia, etc., etc. I think, and then from that point, I was just like, you know, I thought a lot about my actions. Should I have done it? Should I have not? And ended up writing a piece that was published in National Review, and that was my first time getting published in a national publication, sharing my my views on and what had happened in the firing. And my view then, as it is now, is that the truth is what matters, and there's a duty of care that all journalists must do, right? Which is that you don't endanger the people you report on, in terms of like, you don't post where they're living, addresses and things like that. I would never justify that in the name of like reporting. And unfortunately, there are people who do post that type of information on social media and say, well, it's true, so what's wrong with it? Well, there are also ethical standards that journalists need to abide by. But things about like people's names, what they look like and what they say, and if they're arrested and what they're criminally accused of, I think all of that is more than fair game. And not just fair game, I think there's an obligation for people to report on it. And what's happened in journalism ever since George Floyd died is there's been a retreat from that. So newsroom after newsroom in legacy media has adopted positions where we're not going to publish mugshots or booking photos of suspects. A lot of them justify it by saying, well, it can reinforce stereotypes. Okay. Some of them will say, well, they haven't been convicted yet. Okay. Convenient excuses. For me, it's just about, well, I think it's in public interest to put it out. So therefore, I think the content you did on this individual and on the it's not about that individual. It's about the subject as well. And this person is a very public-facing participant of a big show. That opens you up for responses from the public. So I think what happens a lot of times is that liberals will exploit the compassion that exists in decent people and try to make them feel bad to silence them. And it can be done in very subtle ways as well. I've been, for example, criticized a lot for highlighting certain alleged sex crimes committed by suspects and then convicts, and they happen to be gay men, for example, or queer people. And some people ask me, why are you highlighting these cases? It makes a vulnerable community look bad. And I fall back on, well, this happened. It was proven in court, or it was alleged to have happened, and this is how the criminal case is unfolding. It's in the public interest to know. So these are decisions that people struggle with a lot in journalism, and I think and there's always going to be this big debate as ethics do change over time. But in my view, I think unfortunately media has been going in the wrong direction in withholding information. You see, how frustrating is it, for example, when like a suspect's photo has been released in some type of crime, and you see that publications are refusing to publish it or to not even publish the name of suspects. Sometimes they even withhold that, if it's like a so-called ethnic sounding name after a terrorist attack or something.
You saw the way Axel Rudikabana was first depicted, a photo, like 6 years younger than he currently was, and he was described as a quiet choir boy. It's crazy.
Yeah, so, okay, one could argue that at that time, there weren't any contemporary photos of the Southport suspect, so people used what was found, which is his participation in like this BBC charity thing when he was like 10 years old, which is misleading, but that's the only photo they had. Okay, you could argue, so they used what they had. But there are a lot of places who continue to use these extremely outdated images, even after a mugshot had been provided to the public by police after he pleaded guilty. That's another subtle way that journalists manipulate the public. There are a lot of these violent criminals in the US, for example, and if they're of a particular demographic group, the media publications will use photos that are quite old to try to influence the public opinion, and that this person actually wasn't really allegedly that threatening, right? They were just a child. And yeah, they're a child in that photo, but they were 17 or 18 years old when they allegedly violently attacked a police officer, for example. So, media competence is something I hope to talk about a bit more, all the ways that people can be subtly manipulated by press. It's really subtle. If you're not really attuned into it, you'll miss it. But it's out there, and a lot of it can build up to something really, really dangerous and bad, such as like people being over years brainwashed into believing that there's this epidemic of Black people being murdered every minute, every day in the United States, and therefore it's okay to burn down police stations, it's okay to kill police officers, and it's okay to set courthouses and other buildings on fire.